Welcome everyone to the Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon. Thank you for attending and we hope you're having a great conference. I'd like to introduce Matthias and Waldek, who will be presenting a session titled Moving from Slack and Zoom to Teams. Was it worth the effort? Take it away, guys.
Thank you very much. Hey, how's it going?
Doing good.
Good, yeah. So this is Matt from Rencore, CEO and co-founder, and with me is Waldek. Waldek?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I am head of product at Rencore, and let's see more the hands-on part comparing to Matt.
Yeah, so today we are going to talk about our own journey from moving from Slack to and Zoom to Microsoft Teams, what we've learned of it, why we moved, and what we like and dislike after our move now. So first of all, we want to, of course, have the sponsors and the Office 365, no, my Sharepoint conference, that is now the Microsoft 365 conference here, promoted, and the sponsors who are making this all possible. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
To get started, to understand actually why we moved, how we moved, and so on, it's I think quite important to understand who we actually are, what kind of company we are. So we are a B2B software vendor in the Microsoft 365 space. So we develop products for customers who use Office 365. We are a remote company. Even before COVID, we had most of our employees working from home in multiple locations and time zones. We have also external suppliers, developers, testers, and so on that extend our team remotely in various countries. And yeah, well, we collaborate from a business side, mostly on documents, and from a product side, mostly on tasks and code and things like that. Communication is, due to the time zones, to do the remote work, quite asynchronous. So we use a lot of chat, and if it needs to be synchronous, then we do video calls most of the time. And that's already, I think, yeah, 5 years ago when most didn't do video calls. We did video calls. We started with Skype for end users, I believe. We don't have an intranet. We don't have an internal newsletter. We don't have company updates that are sent out. We do that via weekly video calls. So it's very video focused here. So what are our collaboration needs? Waldek, you can share a little bit.
Also, yeah, so sure. So from my point of view, there are two things. Like, one is being part of the management team. It's my job to keep everybody informed where we are with product, what's coming, what are we working on, feedback that we get from customers, the market, and so forth and so on. And then on the other hand, communicating with the dev team. Right, so talking more about features, specs, and all of that, right? Like even maybe to the point going to a place where we review PRs, right? So working more in code. So with that, I'm on a split between two worlds in a way. This technical world where we talk very much tech and code, and then the other one which is very much around documents, keeping each other informed, keeping each other in the loop, presenting things, reporting things, and so on. And so on, right? So, and also for these things, on my end, there are some things that we need to decide here on the spot, but also that there are side for two things where we need to think things through, right? And for that, we often write a pitch that we give everybody, that we share up front. We give everybody time to think. So it's this very much a synchronous way that we balance with the synchronous and here and now going on. So this is on the product side, and I think that that's not quite how you work, Matt, right?
Yeah. So on the business side, basically running the business and communicating with my team members or with my entire team, basically, one of the biggest challenges of working remote, of course, that you don't have that personal feel. So you are not like sitting together, have the water cooler where you talk about things that are going on. You don't have an office vibe or something like that. Yeah, everybody's more or less on their own, and all these normal meetings that you have, they are always very focused. So when you have a video meeting, well, then it's for a reason. You sit together, you want to discuss something and then you're done and you go back to your work and do your thing. So there's no casual interaction, or not that much casual interaction happening in such a way of working, and it's making it also very hard to feel like somebody is doing, because, well, usually when you're working in an office, well, at the end of the day you might go for a beer or grab one from the fridge and just have a chat and see, oh yeah, you have problems at home with your family, whatever, somebody's sick and so on. You don't get these kind of interactions if you're always so focused on the product and don't see what's maybe wrong with your workforce where you can help. But yeah, so that's a big of a challenge in general of remote working, of course, and we'll talk later also what we have done about that in order to tackle these kind of challenges, which are actually have nothing to do with the tool that you're using. All right. So where did we start on? We had a tool zoo, if you want. So we started 7 years ago as a company, and basically very tech focused. We are a product company. We are techies. So everybody, yeah, thought, hey, this is a cool tool. How about we try this out? And we try this out. And well, it ended up that after a while, about 2 years ago, this was more or less our rough tool set for collaboration and communication. So we use Slack and we use Zoom for video communication. At the time, Slack didn't have video calls. So we used Zoom, and we liked Zoom, and it integrated nice and so on. We used Trello for task management, and we also used Office 365 for mostly email and file sharing. So not much else of it. In regards of operations, well, we had on the tech side, we had Azure DevOps. At the time, I think it was still at times where it was VSTS, right? Team services. And from a sales marketing side, we use HubSpot, and support. We had different tools as well, but we consolidated all to HubSpot. And then we had a lot of automation and integrations because there were so many tools. We wanted information from here, push to there. We wanted to have things in sync and so on. So we used Zapier, we used if this then that. We built custom tools. We built custom integrations into Slack, information from HubSpot push to Slack, information from Azure DevOps into Slack. And Slack was our central hub of communication, but also quite messy, I would say. Yeah, Waldek, what was your experience from your side?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting thing, right? Because like if you look at the tools that we use, there's actually this split into like there are tools like Slack and Zoom. So these are common tools for everyone. This would be the place where everyone is at company. But then on the other hand, and like we didn't list all of the tools that we use because they simply wouldn't fit at a slide, right? So as Matt said already, like we're a company of, you could say, pioneers or just people who are keen to try new things. So as such, whenever we would see a new tool, we would use it. And I think you can particularly see a lot of that going on in marketing, and you, Matt, like also experimenting with new tools. Like how can we, like what new is there? How can we work more effectively? And basically trying new things that will help us, but then on the other hand, create this big zoo of tools from which we can choose left and right, right? So that is my experience where like there's a split, things that we share with the team, and then other things that are just everything and anything that people use as they please.
Yeah, just to put that a little bit into perspective, so we are a team of about 20 people plus some externals, which vary, go up and down depending on our needs. And at the time we had with 20 people or 25 people, we had over 100 Slack channels. We have had loads of SharePoint sites, like 3 times more SharePoint sites than employees. That kind of says already how this thing was growing. Where only in Slack we had over 100 integrations and so on. And what was funny actually, every week Slack is sending out a report to the owner of the team in Slack and says, okay, how communication was in that Slack team. And every week I got that report for I think 3-4 years that we use Slack, that 90% of the communication is actually not happening in channels. It's happening in one-to-one and end-to-end chats. So really actually not in the main part of Slack where you openly communicate in channels. That was kind of, yeah, interesting to see, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So to sum that up, why did we actually move to Teams? Well, there were a couple of points. Well, me as a business owner, well, I look at the costs. We had more and more of these tools. At some points, we decided, hey, the free or freemium feature set is not good enough. Hey, we upgrade here, we upgrade there, we upgrade this and that, and suddenly we had a lot of different tools in place that also were overlapping and increased the costs. On the other side, we had Office 365 as well. And that included all of these things, maybe not as good at the time for the different purposes. Then, well, simplicity, fewer systems. Having fewer systems is easier for people to work with. And it's also more secure, less user passwords. Not everything was SSO and so on. Which brings me to the next point. Yeah, central user management, basically SSO, making it easier for everyone. Also, when somebody leaves the company, a contractor or an employee, well, turning everything off was quite a mess if you have 30, 40, 50 tools and you have to think, okay, where did that person have access to here, there? Centralized file storage, well, with Slack, a lot of documents were then just dropped into Slack, and then there was a copy there and there was a copy somewhere in SharePoint. But what was the current one? Hard to say.
The latest one, the latest
Yeah,
two.
exactly. Then about 2 years ago, GDPR came in Germany. There was also like the push, okay, you need to make sure who is processing your data, which other suppliers do you have, data processors, and so on. So, and we thought also, okay, we need to consolidate it somehow. It's getting too complicated to manage, also to make tick the box in regards of compliance. Yeah, well, and we have been a Microsoft partner for a long time. We have multiple Microsoft MVPs, and it's kind of weird if we're not using actually the Microsoft products. And last, our own products are actually supporting Microsoft Teams, so it would have made it even weirder if we build products for Teams but are not using Teams ourselves and cannot eat our own dog food. But to sum it up, it was not due to the lack of features in Slack, right, Waldek?
Yeah, so it's like, so at any point in time, we really felt like we missed something, right? Because like we could chat, we had IM, we had channels, we had video calls, so we didn't really miss anything in the way we interacted with each other, right? So we felt at that time that, well, the toolset that we have matches our needs. So it was more like, well, it's kind of like we don't miss anything, but it doesn't really feel okay. It doesn't feel natural. So like we thought, like, you know what, like we want to give it a try, and we should switch, because it doesn't feel right. It doesn't look right on the outside. Not to mention that whenever I wanted to talk to Microsoft employees, they were like we cannot invite them to Slack, right? Because that doesn't really rub correctly, right? So like eventually that was for us the main driver to say, you know what, Slack is good for what we need, but we really need to switch. We need to just make the call and move over to Teams, because that is where our partners are, our market is, right? So we need to learn more of the challenges that they have. We need to experience more the product itself, basically to know more about it.
Yeah, good point. So actually, you were saying, yeah, we need to try it. Going a little bit back, there was the funny story. So basically, when Microsoft announced Teams about maybe half a year later, or when it was available first time, which is, I think, 4 years ago or 3.5 years ago or something like that. Well, me as a business owner, I was thinking, yeah, come on, let's use this. Save the money on the Slack end. Always looking where to save money, right? As every business owner is at the end. So we did a test run about 3.5 years ago, and I forced basically the entire team, okay, tomorrow we are going on Teams, set up the infrastructure and so on, turned off Slack, turned off access to Slack to everyone, like really the hard big bang rollout, if you want. Well, we are small teams, so it's not that hard, but
a little bang then.
But it was such a pain, and I really suffered myself and everybody else. There were a few advocates in the team. I think we had 2-3 who said, yeah, let's do this, let's do Teams and so on. But most of the others like, oh shit, I miss Slack.
But I think that was interesting approach, right? Because as you've said, you changed the lock on the door. Like there was no way for us, like we couldn't get back to Slack. Like we said, okay, for a month we will give Teams a fair chance, right? So for 1 month, 30 days, we will go to Teams, we will create Teams, channels, and we will live in Teams for a month, whether we like it or not. We want to just give it a chance. And that was basically that experience. Like there were some folks who liked it, and there were some folks who were like, it doesn't feel like, it's not as snippy. It's not like, and here we talk about the beginning of Teams, right? So think really like 3 years back, where Teams wasn't where it is now, right? So it was interesting experience on our end to move from Slack to Teams, and then basically expose ourselves to it for a month.
Yeah, it was a fun experiment. Fun for some, but not for most. At the end, I ran a survey with the team and basically asked them like to rate on a scale 1 to 10 and compare different things, and it was pretty devastating, I have to say. So there were a few people who were like, "Hey, hooray, Teams!" But the majority, I would say, 95% were, or 90% were like, "No." So we switched back to Slack and let it rest for 1.5 years, or no, actually longer. So we switched back to Teams about a little over a year ago, right? Or 1.5 years ago. Yeah, something like that. So how did we roll that out that time? So it's mostly still the same people. So everybody experienced already the bad part of Teams. So everybody was very hesitant when I announced, okay, we are going to try this again. So what we did this time, we did a more phased rollout. First step was to get leadership on board. So I got our leadership team. Okay, we are communicating now in Teams. So we had Slack and Teams at the same side next to each other. But every time somebody communicated with me and said on Slack, then I basically just responded Teams. Nothing else, and then they had to go over. So I really tried to force them to talk to me on the other channel, and it took us a while, and then we got used to it, and they started also seeing the benefits, especially benefits also with communication outside of the company with other external companies, with Microsoft and so on. That is one of the things that helped them a lot. So when they were more or less sold, not really sold, but they were accustomed, let's say it like that, then we set up the structure, teams per department, and so on. We consolidated the data from all these SharePoint sites that have grown over the time, moved data together into the Teams SharePoint sites. Also try to find a way, how do we name everything and so on. So really structured everything. So basically, I did the whole migration on my own over a weekend. And moved our Trello boards to Planner. We used a tool for that because we had quite a lot in Trello. And then we started moving business units one by one. So to keep them basically self-contained. So we started with the easier ones, like our internal operations. They have no tech bias, I would say. We did marketing, sales separately. Sales was on board right away because sales had been using Teams anyway in the back for customer communication, for calls and so on. So they were already half a year before we decided to move to Teams. They actually used it already. And yeah, it went on like that. And then at the end, we reviewed, cleaned up all integrations that we had, realized, hey, probably 2/3 of those nobody is actually using. It was nice at the time, but the requirement is gone. And then we started to train our team. So even a small team like ours, we needed to train team because the people, especially the non-tech people, they did struggle a lot with a lot of things. So we did training sessions, we did little how do I do this and how do I do that, and tip of the day and things like that, an own channel, and that helped, I think, a lot. Although I have to say some people still haven't got it after 1.5 years. So some people still create a new thread every time when they post something instead of responding to the thread and things like that after 1.5 years. Waldek, what's your experience here?
Also, actually, on the tech side, I think that you can easily see that Slack is more made for devs, right? So like one of the key areas in Slack that we used in the past a lot was to share code. Like, so I'm writing something and I want to share code to talk about it or ask feedback. So in Slack, you can do it really easily. You will have formatting, highlighting, and so forth and so on. That doesn't exist in Teams, right? So that was immediately or something like, okay, so this doesn't really feel as good. Also, the editor in Teams isn't as good for devs, right? But overall, like devs on the dev side of things, like we didn't have any issues adopting Teams. For us, it was just like, okay, so we used to work in this tool, now we're going to work in this tool, and how do we do things? Where we realized that some things that we could do in Slack, we cannot do anymore in Teams. Like there are things like commands and so forth and so on that aren't available. But for a big part, it was just using another tool. So I don't think that on the technical side of things, we experienced any, you could say, limits or anything alike, right? I think that on our end, moving from Slack to Teams was easier.
Probably the case, yeah. I believe so too. I had some people who like, well, we use Slack for so long that some things are just standard behavior, like emoji reactions, that you could have the muscle reaction, or that you could do this and that. And we had custom reaction icons with a face of each employee. So somebody could tag a message with their own face and said, hey, I'm taking care of this. So which were basically not really designed, but processes that happened over time that suddenly couldn't live anymore because the functionality was gone. So that was, I think, what pained a lot, because they had to relearn or find new ways to do things that were supposed to be easy in the previous tool. So yeah, where are we now? Well, we are all in Office 365 plus Azure DevOps or HubSpot. So there is nothing special about it. We use the entire suite now with everything. The only thing that we are not using, we use CRM and HubSpot and not Dynamics, but that's just a massive hassle to move everything from one CRM to another. We use instant messaging, video calling, and so on and so on. So nothing really special about us anymore, if you want. But we also have really tried, or at least I have tried, not to build things on top of it, which I did in Slack, for example. So we don't have any bots and basically very little apps yet,
right?
Yeah. But I don't see that much of a need also for these kind of things. We use tabs. We integrate other systems via tabs, files, and so on. Azure DevOps, I don't know. We use, for example, still other tools like Miroboard instead of Whiteboard, because Miroboard is easier to use for us. So it's also integrated in some tabs and so on. But overall, we haven't really customized Teams to anything. So we use it basically pretty vanilla, right? Waldek?
Yes, exactly that. And I guess, like, I think for many of these things is like we don't do this yet, because I think that at some point when there is a business case that is intriguing, like we might explore it, right? Like if we find that there is a bot or a tab or an app that will simplify our work, I'm pretty sure that we will decide to have it in, and probably by the time we talk about it, you already install it. So
speaking of which, I've installed a new one now. Just kidding.
There you go.
No, but still saying after almost 1.5 years now on Teams that we haven't really made massive customizations to it is, I think, a good sign or a good direction for us to go, easier to maintain in that regards. So yeah, maybe also to look a little bit about the things that we really like about Teams or our switch to Teams. I'm just picking two that I personally like a lot. So first of all, well, I communicate a lot with externals as well. So I communicate with Microsoft, I communicate with customers, I communicate with partners, and yeah, well, all of them are on Teams. So what I see, the communication with them is happening either directly in Teams. So that is a massive helper because I can just see, hey, that guy from Microsoft, I tried to reach him for 5 weeks via email, didn't get him, but I see he's available now. I can just write him a message and I get immediately a response because, hell, I see he's available. That is a way of communicating with externals that has changed the way I work so massively and speeds things up for both sides. So that is something what I really, really like. And and another thing is, yeah, I only pick two. Another thing is the automatic status based on my Outlook calendar because, well, I have so many meetings back and forth, also in the evenings. I have to pick up my daughter from kindergarten at lunchtime and things like that. So my calendar is always up to date, and Teams is picking up that status and telling everyone in my company, well, when they want to reach me, they see me, hey, Matt is currently out of office for the next hour, or Matt is currently busy, will not respond, and so on. And I don't have to do that manually anymore like I did with Slack, for example. Waldek, what are your favorites?
Yeah, so you actually picked one, which is the state that is synced with your Outlook calendar. So that is one. But I would also, if I might call another two, then I would say tabs, because they are very easy to pull info in from, and other things like documents, planner boards, DevOps. You can basically pull all of that in channels, and that makes it so much easier to have everything in single place, as opposed to having to go, like having a link somewhere or something that is pinned, and then you have to open the link, go to browser, go elsewhere, and then you want to talk about something, so you need to pull all of that in back. So that whole experience is so much easier with tabs, because you can just expose something directly within the context of where you work already, right? So that makes things a lot easier for us. So that will be one. And two, the things that I like a lot are the channel calls. So directly in channel, you can have a call, and then everybody can see that there is a call going on where we talk about, I don't know, books, what happened, SpaceX launch that wasn't there, I don't know, you name it, right? So we talk about things, and anybody can join. It's obvious, it's visible to everybody, which for us is important, right? Because like we don't have this, as Matt said, we don't have this, let's say, serendipitous thing where people see each other, pass by, like somebody eats lunch and the other person joins. So we don't have any of that, right? Because like we are not on Twitch yet, right? So instead, for us, like this is the working in the open and making it clear to everybody, like, hey, there's a call, like, if you have a moment, if you want to join us and let's talk, right? So this is a feature that I like really, really a lot.
Speaking of which, maybe also organizational wise, how we deal with that. We had that before also in Slack and Zoom. So one of the challenges when you have a remote workforce is exactly that, to keep people together and also give space to talk more casually, not focused on work or specific tasks. So what we have, for example, now in Teams, and we had that before with if this then that automated, we have scheduled coffee calls where basically at the moment 2 times per week, so every Tuesday and Thursday, there is a specific time, half an hour, a channel call, a recurring meeting that's happening in a channel, and it's just saying 15-minute coffee call. Everyone who's available can join, and then people are just talking about random stuff, and sometimes it takes longer, sometimes people join late, talk longer with somebody else, and so on. But it's an open forum, everybody gets reminded, hey, this call is happening now, come on, let's join. And that's what I like a lot, and it helps us as a company also to not be a bunch of people working remotely by themselves from home, but actually be a company who get to know each other and learn what is currently on top of minds of everyone. So we have actually, if I think of it, we have actually a scheduled call every day apart from Monday. So on Tuesday, we have a coffee call. On Wednesday, we have a town hall call, a weekly town hall call that we introduced during the COVID time, where basically it's also, I think, only a 15-minute call, right, Waldek?
Yes, correct.
So it's also only a 15-minute scheduled call, 50-minute to or a quarter to noon. So before everybody goes to lunch, and that call is basically there where I give the entire team an update about developments in business and in general also situation right now with the crisis and so on, which affects, of course, every one of us. We close down our physical office, for example. People want to know what's happening to that. And also can ask me questions. Then Thursday we have another coffee call. Every Friday we have a share call. So every Friday before lunch we have a 15-minute call where everybody can share what they have accomplished during the week and what if we sold something, if somebody made progress with something they had been struggling with for a while, or something got completed, or a good collaboration, just sharing some positive things. It's more a psychological thing, actually. It's setting off everyone with a positive mood into the weekend. But getting together also as a company again. And I think that is working fairly well for us, right, Waldek?
Absolutely.
You can't say anything else now, sorry.
Of course I do. Of course I do, but I think it is great indeed, because it helps us to bond, right? Because like these are sure, we have a scheduled time for that, but that is more like a reminder as opposed to like now you need to join, right? Because like oftentimes we lose ourselves in work, like we're passionate, and like when you get into zone, like you lose totally track of time, especially at home when there is no one around. If you have a dedicated office space, you can just close the door and you can work the whole day. And these calls allow us to, get out, get up, get a drink, get water, coffee, and see who else is out there. Maybe is there anything that we can help with? So these are the easy things that we do, basically mimic more of that working together as opposed to just being like everybody by themselves.
True, yeah. So one of the biggest challenges of remote work is also hearing things that are going on. We have then teams, small teams, some work on this and some work on that, and they make progress somehow, but nobody knows about it in the company because, well, everything is just happening at all. So with the chair call that we have on Fridays, at least everyone hears about what is being accomplished overall in the different departments and areas, so that if they are interested, hey, can you tell me more about what you guys have been doing there? And then we have actually now introduced a couple of weeks ago, before the Wednesday town hall, we have a couple of lessons learned call, another 50 minutes, where one of the team is showing something they are currently working on or what we have just released, so that everybody gets a little bit of an update also what's happening in the different departments, which brings me to another thing that I forgot to mention. We also have a water cooler channel, for example. So we have a company-wide team, and in there we have a water cooler channel, and this is like for random stuff. Like, okay, like you said, SpaceX launch. Okay, who has seen that?
Books, pets, food.
Oh yeah. Yeah, or whatever we find. Yeah, food. Yeah, we have a separate food channel where the foodies talk about things and so on. So yeah, but I think you need this casual space as well, and we had that before in Slack, so it has nothing to do with the tool, but it helps you as a remote company, and I think that is also something that a lot of companies are currently struggling with, who haven't had 7 years of experience with working remote like we have. That helps us at least to stay together, to stay informed, to have a feeling of belonging, if you want, a bond to your team, which is otherwise very hard to maintain. Yeah, what do we not? What don't we miss, or what do we miss? No, what do we miss from Slack and Zoom? Well, first is already striked off. we had
Yeah.
in Zoom, so 4 cameras like we had like a month ago. That was really painful for us because we had calls with 25 cameras on, and I don't know, some people don't think like, that's stupid, who will watch all those people and so on. I read the messages on the user voice article about that, for example. People say, nobody needs this, and nobody needs more than 4, more than 9 or whatever. But to be frank, for me, for example, when I address the entire company, the entire team, and do, for example, a weekly town hall, and I can see all the first faces on the screen. First of all, it gives me a feeling of, okay, these people, these are the people I'm talking to. These belong, this is my audience, and I also want to belong. And I see also their reactions, like one is sitting like this, the other one is like super attentive, the third one is typing, and so on. I see, okay, interests people. You see that reaction, which are otherwise missing totally. Similar like doing a session like this. When you're doing a session in a conference and standing on the stage and you see your audience, it's a total different feeling than now doing a session where you are basically staring at the screen and I don't know, how do people actually react to what you're talking about?
I can see them just fine, all of them. I don't know about you.
They probably think like, when the hell is he stopping to talk? Go ahead, Waldek. What are your thoughts here?
Also, the things that I would love to see improved is the editor. It's like whenever you want to format something or include pieces of code, that is hard. Like formatting doesn't make any sense. I try to make it simple, but at times it just doesn't work, and it's making it so hard. It's like you waste so much time on trying to send whatever. It makes perfect sense in your head because like I am techie, so I know exactly how format things so that they look okay. But then you get something in your way, like, you know what, like Clippy. Like, hey, I see that you're trying to format text. Let me help you. And it's like, and it does something that you do not want, and you waste up so much time like trying to fix it that in the end you say, you know what, like, here, take. So that would be one. The other thing that I miss are commands to remind yourself about things. Like somebody types something for me and say, okay, I want to hear about that back in half an hour. Like that was something that was part of Slack, and that is there out of the box in Teams, and it makes it hard to track them because like you can mark things or pin things, but still, like if you forget about it, then you end up with 30 things pinned, but you forgot you pinned them there, and then when you get back to them, right? So it isn't as easy to work with and to keep things in mind as it was in Slack. Videos you mentioned, Matt, it was exactly that, like the ability to see everybody on a call, whether it's 4 or 6 or 18, right? It's like if you haven't experienced that, like there is no way for us to explain to you the importance of that, but it's really key, right? Because like especially us, like by default we have video on, always on. Like it's more an exception, you know, at hair day, too much wind, I don't know, right? So like these are exceptions that we have, but majority, like 9 out of 10 times, maybe even more, video is on, and that way you can see each other and you have the feeling that you talk to someone else as opposed to you talk at them, right? So these are the things that we used to have. We had less, now it's better, but it would really be good if that would increase even more. And sure, there are limits on that, on Teams capacity, performance, and so forth and so on, but that was like really important part of how we work that we for a part lost, and that is now back. Are there any other things on your mind, Matt, that you would like to point out?
Yeah, so the whole reminder thing, that I use that also massively in Slack, and basically my whole workday was structured around that. So when somebody wrote me something in the evening and I thought, okay, I really have to take care of that, then I just said, little drop down, remind me tomorrow, and then I knew, okay, tomorrow this will come up again, and then I can respond to that person. Or I used also or slash remind. I use also, for example, when I work a lot in the evenings as well. I have calls with customers, with US people and so on. So I'm based in Germany. And well, then something comes up and I think I really should tell that colleague about this. But it's not really nice if you write people at 1 a.m. in the morning and they get a notification maybe and then see somehow the urge, oh, the boss is calling, I need to respond. So I could in Slack, I could just say, okay, for example, remind Waldek tomorrow about something, and then it would set a reminder that would pop up in his channel and automatically send him a message, remind Waldek tomorrow to call Matt about this. Oh, yeah. Well, then off my mind, and he could deal with it. So I really used it a lot. I also used the note to self. I had myself on top of the list. Okay, just writing something down. Okay, look later at it. These kind of things. Really.
And I thought that, that I was the only one talking to myself. Well, apparently it's a thing. It's like
I talk to myself every day. No, but that really turned me down from Teams. Yeah, well, we have to do and we have this, but switching to a different app and not being able to do that exactly where you have the thing that you care about. Basically similar like in Outlook, where you have a message and you put the little flag on it. Would be sufficient for me in Teams, because then I would find these things immediately again and could get a reminder on them. But anyway, this is what I miss. And
maybe one more thing that I will add that we don't have here, but that's something that I've heard from a few folks at Rencore, the ability to stay on top of things. So imagine that you don't spend the whole day in Teams. Somebody asks you something, there is a message to you somewhere. I heard over and over again that people lose track of that. Like, it's hard for them to stay on top of everything that's being where their attention is needed, or where somebody asks something. Like, they lose track of that. Apparently in Slack, it was easier to keep track of all these things than it is in Teams.
Which brings me to one of the points that pain me most. This is the whole reordering of threads. It makes it extremely hard to find things. And coming along with that is the search, which is not really finding things when I'm looking for it. Maybe I'm too stupid to search properly, but at the end, you know, like we discussed something in one channel. I even know the channel where we discussed that. And let's say we talked about product
somewhere
X,
there.
about the topic. Well, everything is collapsed together, all the replies underneath, so I can just see it quickly. Hey, this wasn't that, but because sometimes you have somehow, at least I do, in my mind, okay, how the conversation looked like. So I can identify it immediately because I know this was exactly this, and there posted somebody that icon, that emoji or whatever, and then I find it. But due to the collapsing of the conversation and then reordering as soon as somebody is responding to another thread that was further behind in the history and bringing that to the front again, makes it a hell of a mess to work with for me personally. And I think a lot of others are experiencing a similar thing.
All right, so with that, like, we shared what we love about the fact that we moved from Slack to Teams. We shared a few things that we would love to see improve. I think the most important thing is, was it worth the effort?
So what did we learn at the end? And well, maybe to take that question first, was it worth the effort? Yes, from my perspective. Of course, nothing is perfect. We learned quite a lot of things. So first of all, the learning curve is actually quite high for non-techies. So they had quite some problems, but also for techies at the end, right? Well, like some techies also had struggles, or semi-techies.
Well, I mean, it is more about, like, you're used to doing things in specific way and it works, and then you switch and you wonder, like, why did we switch? Because it used to work, right? So you have to look at company as a whole, the benefit that goes beyond you, and just say, you know what, yeah, we used to do things like that, and now we're gonna do things like that, and there are a few things that we cannot do, and it's perfectly fine because the benefit is for the group.
True. Yeah, so basically change management is probably one part of it, how to get everybody adjust to the new circumstances. One thing that pained me a lot when I consolidated our data, this whole thing, attachments of a conversation, whereas a structure file documents, basically people dropping things into a chat, and it is structured by channels, and it's a whole mess basically. And if you add teams to an existing site, then the standard chat document library is the new attachment library. So the over years built up nice structure of your documents and things is suddenly messed up with all those channels. So I basically had to create for every team a separate document library where we store the structured information to keep it away from the unstructured attachments of all our conversations. So that was quite cumbersome. An interesting learning was our culture didn't change really. So the tool, well, it's maybe obvious, but the tool didn't really make a dent there in that regards. We still communicate a lot in private channels or chats instead of in Teams channels. And we're trying to force each other to move over conversations to public channels so that we have more communication public, that everybody sees it, because it's so easy to say, hey, let's just take these 3 people, tell them, but actually others might be interested in as well. So the tool didn't have an impact on that. This is more a cultural thing that you need to drive your team to. Yeah, it requires proper planning and training. That was probably our lessons learned from our first attempt moving to Teams. Yeah, and then this whole thing is growing like hell. So yeah, you need to really stay in control somehow of this whole environment. And it's not just Teams, it's the entire M365 suite that you are having. So people are creating sites, teams, channels, whatever, and it's really, really hard to stay in control. And actually, this is where we saw the need for ourselves to build a governance tool, which is not available yet. It's still in private preview at the moment, but check that space in the future. So we build that also for ourselves to keep ourselves in control, or our infrastructure in control, to not end up with such a mess and zoo that we had previously in our old days. We also locked down team creation to have a standardized process, because we need to prevent somehow the mess from happening in the first place. It works in a small company, maybe in a larger one, you need a process maybe with approval. So there are loads of provisioning systems out there to enable you to have a nice process behind of it. And yeah, we also limited channel creation to owners. Otherwise, you get so many duplicate channels and channels that nobody's ever using. So that were the minor measures that we actually did. Waldek, what did you learn from your perspective?
Well, essentially, there was the interesting thing, right? That we learned how things can go in Slack. Where in Slack we were more allowing, right? So in Slack, if you wanted a channel, you would create it. Whereas here, say like, and we saw that it took us to the place where we would have channels that nobody would use, crickets. So we say, you know what, like we don't want to do that in Teams. So that's something that we learned from Slack going over to Teams. And I guess that another thing is exactly, Matt, as you said, if you want people to adopt something, like it really requires a lot of talking, a lot of explaining, because it makes perfect sense in your head. Like, but you live and breathe it. Like it makes perfect sense for you because you think about it all the time, but everyone else is not. And if you don't take them through it, they will not get it, and they will not be a part of that adopting wave. They will just stand aside and be like, why are we doing this even? Right? So it's really key thing, and it's not a tech issue. It's people and comms thing.
Exactly, and we have a few minutes left, and we have a couple of questions.
A minute. We have a minute left.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, I will try to respond to the questions afterwards, nevertheless, in writing. But I don't know. Which one should we pick? I don't know if the moderator is picking the question. Okay, somebody shared just Teams better than Zoom. It's a little bit hard to see the overall. So one question was from Sally. It sounds like our colleagues in the company save documents in Teams rather than SharePoint. Does this cause a file management issue for you? So we save documents in Teams and SharePoint, but the Teams document storage is a SharePoint library at the end. So for for the employees, it makes no difference. It's only a difference. Is it an attachment of a chat or is it an actual document in the site? So we don't have separate SharePoint sites anymore for document storage. It's actually only a library in the existing Teams SharePoint site, and just an additional library. David also brought another question. What role does Yammer play in the transition from Slack to Microsoft 365? How do you determine what would make better sense to use, Teams versus Yammer? So I would say Yammer does not play a role at all for us. It's funny, about 10 years ago, I was before Yammer was bought by Microsoft, I was a Yammer advocate like hell at my previous employer at the time, and somehow I lost interest in it. I think for a company of our size, Yammer is overkill. It's just another place to communicate, and it's just confusing for people and so on. I think Yammer is more something where you need to get people together with similar interests, but they are not working together in a real close capacity, maybe in a large organization, people with the same interests throughout the global organization. So for us, Yammer doesn't play much a role. Waldek, do you want to take a question as well, if we still have something?
Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's anything else. So we talked about Yammer, we talked about SharePoint. There is somebody who likes Teams better than Zoom. Perfectly fine. That is preference. How we balance communication with externals with security permissions. So I mean, with regards to comms and externals, from where I sit, we don't collaborate really on files. So with regards to things like calls and chats, there's no reason for us to worry about that aspect of it. I don't know, Matt, if you see it differently on your end.
No, so the externals that communicate with us in Teams, well, they have access to specific teams. So for example, we have external developers and testers. They are part of a development team, so they have access to the data, and there's nothing to hide. We have limited, for example, their permissions on parts of the code base. So where our core IP is, the external developers, if they are not working on it, don't have access to, but that is not relevant for normal collaboration in an organization. Regarding documents, I think the only collaboration we have regarding documents is, for example, with our tax accountant. So our tax accountant is accessing our monthly tax filings and our invoices and so on through SharePoint, actually, and has also access to Teams, but we gave direct permissions for these kind of things. So I don't have any concerns there at the moment.
There's another one that is very interesting, right? So because we brought everything now to Teams, do you think it's easy, or do you find it easier to work now, or was it easier to work in the past? Because if you wanted to do a task in external or in a system, you only had that, so you weren't distracted as much as you are now in Teams, because you are in Teams and you have access to everything at once.
True, yeah. I'm just reading. Do we have time for 2 more questions? Let's just
also, that was one I wanted to ask, right? So how do you experience the work? Do you find it more distracting that you have everything in a single place, or was it easier to focus in the past?
So I gave you the question that I was distracted reading the questions and didn't really listen what you were saying. So
because you are in Teams, there you go.
Because
so
I'm in Teams. So
that is the answer already.
Now, so I have to say, actually, for me personally, it's less distracting because, well, I tend to, before already, for example, where things were a lot in Slack and Outlook and so on, I tend to just shut down the application entirely, and then I'm muted out and can focus on things. So with Teams, I do the same. When I shut down Teams, then basically all the noise is gone, and then I'm not distracted. When I'm in Teams, then I'm really focused on doing my work in there, and then I have everything together. So it's kind of, yeah, more separated for me now. Whereas with Slack and Zoom and so on, then we had a message here, I had a Zoom call popped up, a reminder there, and so on. It was different way of working, but at the end I think it's more like a behavioral thing. It has nothing to do with the tools, at least I believe that.
Okay.
I think we are 5 minutes before start of the next session, so I don't want to kill the preparation for the next one. Thank you, everyone, also for your questions. I will have a look if I can answer the remaining ones in writing, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.